We should be live. Let me double check when we're a few minutes early. I like to get started while people are joining in. And let me double check on Luma, just making sure that the stream is live in the right place. Should be. And if anyone's already here, let me know if you can see the stream or not. You on LinkedIn should be live. I set this up a little bit differently, but it looks like we're in the right place. Cool. Again, as people join in, say hello in the chat. I'll also share a link. I'll probably share it a couple times, but how to join the actual stream. So if you want to come up with your audio or video or both, you'll be able to do that as well. Okay, yeah. It looks like we're streaming in the right place. Sorry again. I set this one up a little bit differently on LinkedIn Live. The way that you can now create an event and then link to a previously created event in StreamYard, which is what I'm using to stream. And I hadn't done that before, but I just want to make sure it was in the right place. It looks like this. And again, we're a few minutes early, so I'm sure people will be joining in. I know there's quite a few RSVPs for this one. It's also getting to the middle of December, so I know some people are kind of checking out a little bit more too. So we'll see how many people show up. Again, say hello in the chat. Maybe where you're watching from, and a little bit about what you're building or learning would be great. And that's a good reminder as well. I have to pull up the other LinkedIn chat window. I also put up the chat on the screen, and I'll pull up the slides. Again, I'm going to wait until we reach the 1 o'clock mark, or 2 minutes, depending what time zone you're in, before we start going through these slides. And I'll share all these links as we go as well. But again, as people are joining, feel free to say hello in the chat, where you're tuning in from, and then also great hearing a little bit more about why maybe you're probably building with agents or thinking about building with agents, since that's the book topic this month. Mukesh said, hello from Denver and learning AI agents. And if you've read the book, I know quite a few people join and you haven't read the book, and that's totally fine. Or you've read part of it. If you did read the book, let me know your thoughts on it. Again, we'll open up for thoughts a little bit later as well. I'm not sure if Mukesh, if you actually read the book or not. And again, I'm going to go through a couple slides just as the intro, and while people are joining in, because there's usually like a few minutes that kind of people are still joining, even a little bit after the start time. And then I'll share a link as well if you want to come up and join the stream here, talk with audio and or video. A lot of people also just talk in the chat, and that's totally fine too. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. And it's really fun. The more active people are in the chat, usually the more fun the event is, I think, for everyone. So again, feel free to say hello in the chat, where you're watching from, why you're interested in agents. Have you built agents before? What kind of agents? Feel free to put that in the chat. And we'll get going here in a minute. Just as a quick note on, someone, hang on 1 second, sorry. Someone's like trying to comment a Zoom link in the chat, which is wrong. And I assume they do that to, I don't know, get people's information or something. I deleted it. So don't click on that Zoom link that someone posted in the chat. If it comes up again, I'll try to delete it as well. If you're on the live stream, you're in the right place. Don't click on someone else's random Zoom link. I haven't seen that before. Something else I'll have to keep a lookout for. Interesting. All right. So this month's book was Building Applications with AI Agents. And I'll share the link in the chat as well. So this is to the Direct O'Reilly link. I've been reading a lot of the books on the platform. From there, links to like where you could buy it. I also always like to mention that a lot of libraries and universities, at least in the States, you can get access to a free version of the online O'Reilly platform. I don't remember if it has 100% of like all the new release books, but it does have most of their books, and I think it does have the new ones. So I always recommend checking that out if you don't want to buy the book or you want to preview the book initially or something like that. It's just cool that you can have access to that platform through again a lot of libraries or universities. And then also most books have an accompanying GitHub. This one is the same, so you can go check out the GitHub as well if you want to go look at the code. And even if you haven't read the book, I think this book is way more text heavy, and not in a bad way or anything like that, than code heavy. So it talks a lot of theory around the agent stuff, and then it does have implementations of most of the stuff that it talks about using like the LangChain platform. So I'm going to share also the direct links to the slides. So I know some people like to look through them later. I also try to capture notes at the end, at the very end slide. So I'll keep notes there if like interesting libraries or things come up that people are talking about. And if you haven't been to the AI book club before, in short, we've been reading a new book every month, and then we discuss online in this format. We've changed formats a couple different times. There is also a Slack channel. If you want to join the Slack channel, there's an introductions area. You can kind of more permanently introduce yourself there. There's also the AI Reading Club channel. So Flight is an open source AI orchestration platform that I work on. And there's an AI Reading Club channel within that Slack group. So we're using that group as kind of the place, but you can go to the AI Reading Club channel. We've also talked about expanding the outside of just a book club and also reading papers. So you can go there. And then the best place to kind of keep up to date with all upcoming events is on Luma. You can subscribe to the calendar there, get updates. And then I've also been keeping track of the books that we've been reading. You can find the list from 2024, this whole year as well, on GitHub. And I might be adding more to that hopefully next year. I've been thinking about how to kind of take better notes to share those with people. And then just kind of recap of the schedule. So if you were here for every single meeting, these are all the books that we've read. Building LMs for Production. I guess I won't read all the titles because it's quite a bit. This is our third purely agent book. So a lot of agents are talked about in a fair amount of the other books, obviously, because it's a hot topic right now. And a lot of the other ones were around LMs. But we had the AI Agents and Actions we read in April. This is a good book, but it was a little outdated, I feel like, just because the industry is moving so fast. And I believe they're actually doing a second version, second edition of this book next year. So I'm sure they're going to update it. So that actually might be one we read next year. We did Building Agentic AI Systems from Pact. And then this one was Building Applications with AI Agents. And if you were here for any of the other book clubs, I'd also love to know, what was your favorite books that you read this year? Or if you weren't, which ones sound most interesting to you? I actually really liked Hands-on APIs for AI and Data Science. I thought that was a really, really good book. Really practical stuff. And even though it wasn't really an LM focused one, they actually even end with a chapter. I think it was the last chapter where we kind of build an agent, which was kind of cool. But I thought it was just really good practices for like building APIs in general for the AI and data science space. And then schedule for 2026 so far. Let me know what books you want to read. We have a lot of slots to fill up. There's a whole bunch of books coming out in 2026 that are in like early access right now. I usually don't like to select them until I know for sure they're coming out on that date because they get delayed. So January next month, we're going to be reading Hands-on Machine Learning with Scikit-learn and PyTorch. This book, or this from this author, there was another book that was Hands-on Machine Learning with Scikit-learn and TensorFlow that was really, really popular. I think they did two editions of that, at least, if not three. And this is by the same author, but now they're switching to PyTorch instead of TensorFlow because it's more widely used. Several people had said they wanted some other books that weren't just like LM focused, which I totally agree. We had a lot that came up last year. Not all of them were LM focused, but obviously there's a lot going on in that space. So this is going to be a general machine learning kind of book. Looking at the chapter titles, it goes through everything from classical to reinforcement learning to LLMs. I think it's going to be a really good one. Maybe if you're newer to the space, especially, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't matter your experience. It'll be a really good refresher and probably learn something new regardless. But if you are new to the space or newer to the space, I think this book is going to be really, really good. Oh, and someone mentioned Gen AI design patterns. Cool. I'll look at that. Actually, I'm going to write that down as a note. Gen AI book. Or actually, I'll keep it in here. I'll just say design patterns. I'll put it as a placeholder. No guarantee it'll be April yet, but I'll go ahead and look it up as well. And then February, AI system performance engineering. This one's going to be really cool. I'm excited for it. Like, it goes into CUDA, a lot of performance type of stuff for optimizing model training and inference. I'm excited to kind of deeper behind the scenes there. It's also by Chris Fregley. We've read one of his other books. He's written multiple books though, and I really liked it. So I'm excited to see more from the author. He actually joined the stream a couple times too during it. And then March, we're going to read Context Engineering for Multi-Agent Systems, so another agent book back in March. So again, if you have recommendations for what you want to read in 2026, let me know. You could join the Slack channel or DM me on LinkedIn, and then we can potentially add them to the list. And like I said, there's a whole bunch coming out that seem really interesting. All right, so the format, again, say hello in the chat, and I'm going to share a link right now. So if you actually do want to join in the audio and or video part of this, you can. I know plenty of people like to stay in the chat, and then again, that's fine too. If you want to be active in there, it makes it way more fun, like I was mentioning. But there's a link if you do want to join in here. And I think one last thing is also, while people are maybe joining, shout outs. So it's been really cool having this little section just before we dive deeper into the book, which the next slide will have a list of all the chapters, and then we can go through all the chapters, and people can comment on what they think is interesting. But if you have any shout outs, like, are you hiring? Are you looking for a job? Do you have any awesome projects you're working on? Feel free to either put them in the chat, or if you come up here and talk, do a quick shout out. I think we've had people find jobs from this event, which is really cool. Like, they're like, oh, I just graduated and I'm interested in working in this space, and someone else is like hiring in that exact space. So really cool to always see that. So feel free to do any shout outs in the chat or when you join here. So we'll recap the chapters here. So I'm going to wait a few seconds because I know there's sometimes like a 30-second delay from me streaming to when you get it sometimes. So I'm going to see if anyone has any shout outs first, take a sip of water, and then we'll get into recapping kind of all the chapters and then discussing around those themes. When someone mentioned, are you referring to Agentic AI design patterns from Google? I'll have to look at that book and see. I know there are several in my playlist on O'Reilly. Like, I tried to keep track of a lot of the books that are coming out. If it's a newer one, it's probably in there, and I'll pull it up later. But let me know, because I think there might be Gen AI design patterns and then Agentic AI design patterns. They might be different, but I actually don't remember. So it said, greetings from Orlando. Awesome. I used to live in Melbourne, Florida, an hour south of Orlando on the coast. So I've been to Orlando quite a bit. Used to have a Universal pass. All right, so I'll recap the chapters. So we have introduction to agents, and then I'm going to go through slides and kind of maybe dive deeper into these chapters. But feel free to take the discussion where you want to go here as well, either in the chat or again by joining from the link I had posted. So an introduction to agents, which covers kind of what an agent is, designing agent systems. We had user experience design for agentic systems. And then we talked about tool use, which, gives your agents more agency. And then knowledge and memory, learning in agentic systems from one agent to many, validation and measurement, monitoring in production, improvement loops, and protecting agentic systems, and then human agent collaboration. If anyone did read the book all the way through, or if you've partially read it, or if you haven't read it, you could say which ones sound the most interesting to you. Did anyone have a favorite chapter or anything interesting that they either learned, or again, if you haven't read this yet. Do any of these chapters kind of stand out and sound more interesting to you? And someone said, happy to catch a live session. Their book collection is growing. Oh, and someone shared the generative AI design book. That's I'll take a look at that one. And someone said, hello from Oakland, long time ago from Orlando. So all of us from Florida and moved to the West Coast. On these chapters, I like this book. Out of the agent specific books, I think it was my favorite to read. And I've been building agents for the past few months a little bit more. So some of it felt like, recapping stuff I've done before. But if you haven't built anything or gone through other courses or anything like that, I thought this was a really good introduction to how to think a lot about these things if you haven't implemented them before. And again, this book is a little bit more on the text heavy theory side, which I think is good for something like this, because if you don't do that in a book right now, I feel like you just get outdated incredibly fast. So they have a little bit more on the theory, and then they have code implementations, usually in LangChain or LangGraph. And like I had shared the GitHub, you can look up the GitHub yourself if you want there. But I felt like the text here was a little bit more evergreen than some of the other ones we had read, where it had already felt outdated. So I thought that was actually a good way to write this book. If you read reviews, people have different opinions on that. I thought it was good. I think most people thought it was good, but then you see people wanting more practical stuff. But it's hard to put in a book right now, especially in a space like this, because it gets outdated really, really fast. I think, let's see, my favorite chapters was, I think because it went more than just multi-agent stuff that you would think from the title here, was probably chapter 8, where it said from one agent to many, and kind of how to think about breaking that down. Again, if you haven't done that before, built like a multi-agent system, I think that'd be a really good intro to it. And then they actually go deeper, I thought, almost into orchestration and stuff, because there's a lot of orchestration you need to do, handling memory and where to run multiple agents. So I thought that was pretty interesting and probably a really good chapter if you hadn't done stuff like that before. And Cody says, improvement loops sounds interesting. So I'll go through the chapters real quick and maybe dive a little deeper in what they covered. And then if anyone has any thoughts, again, feel free to share them. And I'll share the link to the book again one more time, since I think a lot more people have joined now. This is to the O'Reilly platform. Again, you should be able to find this wherever. Probably if you have local bookstores too, you should be able to find it there. So chapter 1, the introduction to agents. They go through defining AI agents. Again, this definition I feel like varies between people. The pre-training evolution just talks about how LMs kind of actually now took off, because we can actually do good training, different types of agents, which I think also is covered in other chapters here. I think this might be the list too, I think there's one of the other chapters. I think I'm getting confused. The different types of agents, like if you've built them before, I think they called it, I hadn't heard this term, but it was like reflex agents, which is like you have a really lightweight router or if statements to route to the correct agent that you need to go to. And then it goes into like react agents, which is the reflection and action agents, reflection agents. They had a separate category for deep research agents, which often I think is kind of a combination of the other stuff above. And then planner executor agents. And there might have been one other one, but I think they kind of fall into those categories. Most of the time when I've been building them, depending on the use case, obviously, like the lightweight routing can work really good. But I also like the React style is pretty awesome. If you're okay with a little bit more latencies, that's where it does an action, reflects on it to make sure that it did the right thing. It's cool, kind of really cool to see it like autonomously call different agents to solve different tasks. And then one of the more practical ones that I really, really like is actually just the planner execution agent, where you have an LLM basically comes up with a plan of what other agents or tools to run, and then you can run them in parallel too. So if they don't have dependencies on other steps, you can basically run a whole bunch in parallel and then make a cascading tree of calls to agents or tools. And that's been one of my favorites for a lot of applications right now. If you don't need the reasoning in between other tasks. So if you're fetching data and you need to reason about it, it might not work for it. But you can also do a combination I found, which I don't think they really talked about in here. A combination of these different types of agents. Like you can do the planner execution agent in chunks and then do like a reasoning and action step after that to make sure that that did accomplish what you want, and then do another tree of like asynchronous calls. So I've been playing around like combining these different things for different tasks, which has been really cool. They talk about model selection. I think a lot of people right now are building with the APIs that we all see, but then later chapters go into like doing small language models and fine tuning models. Also, would love to hear in the chat like what type of models are you building with. So a lot of times right now I'm still using something like the OpenAI API or Claude, but I think there's a lot of really cool promises of small language models in the future. Also, we have great open source models coming out all the time, like DeepSeek, etc. But you can also call from API. So those are also hosted in places like Paracel is one of those places where you can call and pay per token through an OpenAI completion API. So if you want to mess around with different models, would love to hear about that. They talk about from synchronous to asynchronous operations, practical applications, use case, workflows, and agents, principles for building effective agents, organizing for success in building agentic systems. They briefly talk about some frameworks. Again, there's a ton of frameworks here. Would love to hear about what frameworks people in the chat are using. I've actually been building outside of frameworks a lot lately, but I do want to dive back in and try some stuff maybe with LangGraph as well. Would love to hear the agent frameworks people are using. Seems like when I talk to most people, it's LangGraph right now. A year ago, it might have been different. Like Crew AI came up a lot more. And again, this is just my talking to people knowledge. I don't actually have data to back up what is the most widely used framework, but it seems like LangGraph right now might be one of them. And then chapter 2 is designing agent systems. They design your first agent if you've never built one before, and like how you would call a tool. Again, model selection for that, some memory, orchestration, design trade-offs for different architecture patterns, and then some best practices. And I'll go through these pretty quickly. And again, we can come back to other chapters that people want to talk more about. 3 was user experience design for agentic systems. How do people interact with them, context retention, and continuity. And they go deeper into parts of these in a lot of the other chapters. So you'll see some of the stuff is like repeated here in some other chapters, but they dive into a little bit differently. But like context retrieval or retention, like keeping track of state of interactions, either between multi-agents or just a single agent, like you've probably used the chatbot before, and it's keeping track of the history as you're kind of chatting in there. So different ways that you want to design that. And again, not every design or agent that you're building needs all that stuff. And so you want to think about kind of when you're building this out, what needs to happen. Tool use, they, again, use LangChain in here and kind of just talk about how you would define, create a tool or define it. In LangChain, you just add like a decorator on top. And then I think you're kind of required to, they have different tools you can import, but if you're writing as a function, then you do a doc string as a description of the tool and maybe an example how to use it. That's actually, again, when I've been using no framework, I kind of have been making something similar. I'll do like a simple decorator and then add a tool decorator on top of a function I write. And then I use a doc string for the LM to read that in. It makes it easy it gives you a little syntax niceness, even without a framework. And then I called it, I think, a similar way like LangChain would, like you look at the function name, and then also the little doc string that you add as a description of the tool. And that's worked pretty good for me. They talk about orchestration. Again, kind of recaps a lot of stuff in the other chapters, a little bit of context engineering between agents or between tools or for a single agent. Actually, in this case, I think the orchestration, like here, isn't multi-agent yet. And then the multi-agent chapter, which is 8 or something like that, was the one I said I liked one of the most. It goes more into orchestration between multi-agents. 6 talks about knowledge and memory. This is using different types of storage for memory, like RAG, graph RAG, and more simple memory approaches if you don't need a semantic memory. Learning in agentic systems. So this talks about different ways to add learning into your agent. The non-parametric way is usually adding stuff to prompts automatically. So if you have successful examples, you can add that in as like a successful example to a prompt or some sort of database that could look it up. And then the parametric learning is like fine-tuning. You've probably maybe heard of fine-tuning before, probably done it. You could do full fine-tuning on the model. You can also do DPO, direct preference optimization, which is where you give it a good or a preferred output and a less preferred output. Usually you say, I like this one. So it doesn't really fine-tune all the weights, but it or like the foundation knowledge, but it'll fine-tune how to output. And then they touch on some reinforcement learning, but they link to like a bigger code example outside of the book, which again, I think is in that GitHub repo. And then 8 was from one agent to many. And also in the chat, who is building like multi-agent systems? Is anyone just sticking with one agent? Or have you found yourself usually going to multi-agent? I think that's an interesting question. And here they break down kind of how to think about it. How many agents do you need? Principles for adding agents, which, I mean, I think, again, I asked the question in the chat because I think it's interesting to think about. Do you always need to add more agents? And if you do, you add some complexity, but you also kind of get to break apart the problem better in a lot of ways. So it depends on what you're doing. But even for simpler stuff, I've kind of found if you have a good orchestration piece, so they actually mentioned using actor frameworks like Ray. There's a couple I hadn't heard of. And then it also does a lot of Flight, the open source platform I mentioned that we work on at Union. That when you use something like that, it handles the orchestration piece, I feel like, really well between multi-agents. So you don't have to worry that much about adding different compute or containers between agents and then keeping those warm. Like Flight has a lot of great features to make that really easy. And so at least for me, when I'm using stuff like that, I found that it isn't that hard building a multi-agent system. But I think if you're not used to working with something like that, there might be some more difficulty. But I like being able to break apart kind of the sub problems and then have the specific tools tied to that one agent that does a really good job of calling that one tool. And then it also allows you to kind of have a little bit more plug and play for like different LLMs, different types of models. For example, like your planner executor model might be a foundation model, but then the smaller tool calling one could be a much simpler, cheaper model that if you're doing a ton of it could add up over time. So I think that's pretty interesting. Also handling failures and durability type of things, I think, is also kind of nice broken out into multi-agent. So if one agent fails after you do something like the costly planner execution step, again, if you're using something like Flight or some of these other frameworks, I think it might be easier to recover from as well. And then you have like the saved planner executor state. You're not spending all those tokens again. And then you can just retry from kind of that previous state. So they talk about doing that in this chapter in both in the actors framework and then the orchestration and workflow engines. They talk about like using Ray and Temporal, and then Flight, like I was mentioning, the platform I work on, does a lot of that same stuff they mentioned. So I thought this chapter is really cool and talks a lot about the stuff that I guess I ran into earlier on when I was doing multi-agents. So if you haven't done a lot of multi-agent systems, I thought this chapter was really good. Daniel said they're building multi-agent systems for now. The list root agent, churn agent, navigation, docs agent, and more coming. Yeah, I don't know. I have found it just easier, or I like to break it down. And I was asking because I'm curious. It seems like most people I talk to have like multi-agents. Like they break apart a step when you're adding more complexities and you break that down to an agent that does that one step really good. You can adjust the prompt inside that agent and it doesn't cascade to really behavior to your orchestration, or like in this case, the root agent, right? It's kind of like you get this extra abstraction between agents. And I really like that. And that's why I was curious if people have been like, no, I'm adamantly doing single agents versus multi-agents. Most people I've talked to, seems like when you're adding a little bit more complexity in tool calls, like I don't think there's a hard cutoff for the amount of tools or anything like that. I think they might recommend in this book like over 10 or something like that to maybe break it apart. But I've just found it really nice to be like, as an example, even if you're building a example that isn't super complex, but you have like a weather agent, and that is an agent that can call the weather API out, call that well, and then output the result in a certain way. And then if you need to adjust that prompt, you can, and it's like kind of separated from your root agent. I don't know. I found that helpful. Curious what other people's thoughts are. If you happen to be watching this later too, let me know. I think it's interesting to hear about people building agents, but for the most part, I think I've seen multi-agents. And then chapter 9, they talk about validation and measurement. Yeah, this one talks about evals. I kind of wish this went a little deeper. Maybe I need to reread this chapter. Some of the later ones, I only had about a week to read this book because I was at reInvent the week before, and I didn't get any reading done there. But I don't know. I mean, I think these are just really interesting areas too. Like the evals and validation for LMs is kind of hard. They talk about one, at least I think you should always have like an input output, some sort of measurement there. And for your validation or evals, you should know what your kind of business impact or company goal is for that LM. And then that can be kind of the start of the gold standard for it. And then they talk about breaking it apart into different components. And it's kind of a little bit of a short-ish chapter. And then the monitoring chapter, I think, builds on it and goes into a little bit more practical ways to think about it. Always suggest monitoring. It doesn't matter if it's agents or any other model in production. You should at least be looking at inputs and outputs in some way. Even if you don't have a really silver bullet metric that tells you stuff, I always kind of recommend. I used to work at a monitoring company. Actually, it was a tool that was mentioned in here. I didn't put in the bullet list, but YLabs I actually used to work at a couple of years ago. And so we built tools around ML monitoring, and then we were some of the first to build around LM monitoring too, which was really interesting. Oh, cool. And someone came up. I'm going to add them to the stage. Hey, how's it going? Oh, they left. If you do want to come back up, let me know. For choosing the right metric, like there isn't a single one for LMs because they're so subjective usually. Again, if you're actually doing like classification on unstructured data with an LM, you can measure that. But if it's returning like generated text, it's really hard. And one thing I'd recommend for people, if you don't know where to start, is you can take like a lot of other lightweight metrics and do maybe a little bit of a shotgun approach on those, and then pare down what isn't useful later. But you might even find stuff like looking at word count or something like that on the output. And if all of a sudden one day you're just looking at that metric or you have it in a dashboard and all of a sudden it goes really, really high or it goes really, really low versus what it normally is, that could be a good indicator that like something's wrong. Like maybe an API is failing, so it doesn't get the information it needs, so it returns a really short sentence versus like what it was doing for a paragraph before. So even if you're not monitoring all those spaces and betweens and even verifying the output, that metric could tell you that there's like some sort of behavior change or failure. So like sentiment's another really good one. There's a whole bunch of out of the box ones you can take from like the NLTK library or other lightweight LMs that are like a BERT models trained for. And I think that can tell you a lot in production of like what's going on, or at least give you a signal. And then also now everyone talks about LM as a judge, which is interesting. It seems to be one of the good ways to look at that kind of subjective output. But then you run into the other problem is now you have another LM. And do you want to monitor that one? Probably not, but it's just interesting. They talk about different stacks in here. They talk about Arise. This is one of the ones I've heard about the most as well. They're really cool. I've actually used Arise Phoenix, which is their open source. They also have a hosted version, which is for monitoring LM specifically. They have Signas. I've never heard of this one. Looks interesting. Langfuse, I've heard of. And then they kind of talk about building your own with different stacks. Like one uses just open telemetry and Grafana, I think. And actually, a lot of these, like Arise, at least, is also built on open telemetry. I think a lot of these are just a way of storing data. So if you build the output in OTel or open telemetry, then you can probably quickly connect it to most of these other ones pretty easily. Weights and biases is also built on that. They have a LM monitoring one called Weave, which is really cool as well. So if you want to look at traces and experiment management with weights and biases, they're really cool. It talks about how you might want to visualize that and do alerting, like I'd mentioned. It could be any sort of metric that you're kind of thinking that might be useful, and then maybe you set a threshold on that type of metric. So it could even be an LM as a judge over time, and when it's a certain confident threshold that it's hallucinating or something like that, you can send some sort of alert to you. This is actually an area I want to work more in 2026 as well. I was toying with the idea of maybe building another like lightweight monitoring type of library that might tie in with Flight. I think it'd be interesting. Oh, and John is here. Let me see if John has something to say. Welcome up, John. Hello. Hello, John. Testing. People are joining, but either there's technical difficulties or I'm not sure. Oh, it's on mute. I'll leave you up for now. You can unmute if you want to join in the audio conversation. I think you're on mute now if you are talking.
Nothing to say. I was just trying to see how StreamYard works.
Oh, got it. Well, welcome. Yeah, if you're looking at if you're going to do some streams yourself, I like StreamYard. It's something I've used for years now, and it makes it very easy to do like these type of live events and even invite guests on. It's been one of the most reliable. Like it's had issues occasionally, but it's been surprisingly reliable, and it works for almost any guest I've had on without like doing anything crazy. It's kind of nice.
Well, I would certainly have to figure out how to use mic and audio here, because when we turn off the mic, I get multiple things.
Oh. And are you building anything with agents, or are you just checking out StreamYard? Oh, are you building anything with AI agents? Nope. You're on mute again, but I saw the head shake. No.
The delay is killing me. I got to get turn off.
Oh yeah, no worries. Oh, and someone asked, is the slide share? It is. I'll share it again in the chat. It's just a summary of the chapters on the PowerPoint, so nothing too crazy.
Okay, so if I get out of the other one, I can actually hear things and not have multiple conversations with a lag.
Oh yeah. So there, when you're streaming on StreamYard, there's often a few second delay, up to 30 seconds sometimes, from like when we say something to when it gets to like YouTube Live or LinkedIn.
Yep. Great. I'll just go in the background and keep listening.
Thank awesome. You. Well, yeah, no worries. Thanks for popping up.
Crazy stuff.
All right. And then chapter 11 was improvement loops. Someone said they thought this sounded really interesting. Talks about feedback pipelines, like human in the loop, HITL. They talk about prompt refinement. Usually these are the things, again, if you haven't built agents before or you're starting, things you're going to want to do and improve your agent as you go over time is probably rewrite your prompts. Adding examples helps a lot too. Usually for me, this has been like maybe adding an example of how to call a tool, especially if things need to be a certain format, like an int or something like that, when you're calling something. And then decomposing tasks. So if you do have a big task, chunking it up and separating it into smaller tasks. And again, I found this to be really helpful with multiple agents as well, again, depending on what you're doing. And would love to hear in the chat if you've done this a lot without multi-agents, or if you've kept it in a single agent. And then tool refinement. Usually, again, if you're writing these tools yourself, you might need to refine like outputs or inputs, or what it's doing to get to those outputs. I've had some things in the past too, just like types. Like, again, if you're building a calculator function, should you pass a float or an int? And then how do you make sure that you're passing the right data type or converting that data type when it's coming out? Experimentation. Outside of agents, this, again, if you've done machine learning before, this probably isn't new either, but you want to adjust prompts or try different models. You can have shadow deployed models where you're running it on the same input, but it's not actually giving output to the user, but you can see how it's behaving versus the actual deployed model that the user's interacting with. And then A/B testing, very common as well. Try out different models, look at both the results, sometimes present those to a user, like you've probably used ChatGPT before or Claude, and it gives you two at the same time. And then you might select which one you like better. That's an example of A/B testing. Or you could just give them A or B and see which one people like. And then continuous learning, so in context learning, and this kind of goes back to one of the other chapters we were saying too, where you can either add examples like dynamically into prompts, or you might have a continuously kind of updated knowledge base, or you can do offline fine tuning as well. And then as I said, protecting agentic systems. This talks usually about stuff maybe you've heard about or thought about, like jailbreaking, making agents and LMs misbehave. There's a cool library called LM Guard they use as an example to one. I think actually you can kind of use it to look for like jailbreaking type of prompts, but they also have other built-in methods that were cool, like sanitizing names, etc. So in your output, you always want to make sure not returning real social security numbers or names or anything like that. And you can actually have some cool features built in here that look for something like names and then replace them all with like John Doe, for example. And then the last chapter was just human agent collaboration. Talks about kind of how you might want to approach this maybe internally at a company if you haven't thought about that before. The trust you want to establish in your agent. Should you actually have the agent doing things at the end, or should you have that human in the loop? Just kind of just tackle some of those questions here. So that was a recap of all the chapters. Again, I'll be looking in the chat, see what people are saying. I'll share the link again too if people want to join up, or just test out StreamYard. I'll share this in the chat again. And I see there's some, I think, good looking comments in the chat. Oh, got to reload page to post my comment. Someone said, I read AI engineering textbook. So what textbook do you all suggest me to read next? If Sakit asked that question, that's a good question for the audience as well. If you want to answer in the chat or come up, let us know. My suggestions. So actually thought, so that's a really good book that is a little bit, it's written in a more evergreen way where there's not a ton of code examples. And it depends on your background of like what I would actually suggest next. But what I was thinking, maybe this changed a little bit, but earlier in the year, I was saying the 3 books that I read recently, this is before some of the other ones I read here, that I thought would be really good if you hadn't done a lot of LM stuff before, is one, AI engineering, covers kind of all the theory, is really good. I really liked building LMs for production. It's way more practical. We read it in January, so I don't know. I don't think it's probably really outdated, like, because it covers like how to do RAG, use OpenAI, etc. I thought it was a really good hands-on introduction. And if some of the code examples are outdated, you could probably figure out how to update it. And then the other one, which we read December of last year, so it's not on this list, is Building Large Language Models from Scratch. I thought that book was really good if you want to dive deeper into like what's going on behind the scenes of when you build a large language model. And so you actually go through, you'll build your own tokenizer, all the steps to train a large language model or build a large language model from scratch. It's a pretty small one. You can train it on almost any computer, but it's a really, really good step to kind of, really, really good book to go deeper into large language models. And it's actually one I want to reread because I read it in a month and it was really good. I want to actually go through and take my time implementing all the sections and maybe even implementing them a little bit myself and then looking at his code, but think about how would I build like, my tokenizer to do whatever. Yeah, so the Sakit said they're a student new to AI. I think all those would be good to check out. The AI engineering, I really liked building a large language model from scratch. It's on Manning. And then building Elms for production. I thought those are all really good. Oh, and Nikhil said the LM Engineer's Handbook. That one looked really good. I haven't read it. But that looked really, really good. I was almost on the list. I think at the time it was a whole bunch of LM books came out. There had a lot of similar topics. So we didn't get to read every single one. But that one did look very solid. Aristotle asked, have you used Microsoft Foundry? If so, what are your thoughts? I haven't used it yet. It is one of the infinite amount of tools that I do want to go poke around and kind of see what it's like. If anyone else has used Microsoft Foundry, let us know in the chat. I actually saw Udacity has a new nano degree, which is their it's like a few courses together that make up a little bit of a bigger course. They have one that's like building AI agents on Microsoft's Foundry, which I was going to maybe check out if I have time. John asked, August and now December are about building agentic systems. Which one do you think is best for getting started? I think the best agent specific one was this book, in my opinion. Other people could disagree, or if you have another book. Also, April was about agents too. This one was a little outdated. It was a good book. Like I had mentioned, I think they're coming out with a second edition this year or in 2026. It was a good book. It's just, again, a little bit outdated with the examples they used. The building agentic AI systems, I didn't like as much as this one. I thought this had better, concise descriptions and had maybe, I don't know. I don't know if the other one really had more code examples. It might have a little bit. But I liked this one better for me personally. Again, you might have a different opinion. One cool thing too is if you do have the O'Reilly subscription, or again, go look and see if you can get it through the library or your university for free potentially. The free versions might not have all the other books in there, but if you do have the O'Reilly subscription, it has like most of the Pact and Manning books as well. So you can actually go skim both of these and then make a decision what to read if you're reading it online that way, or if you have access to them. But if you're going to buy one, just my preference would be this December one. I also liked last year, since we're on this page too, I kind of like the domain specific ones. There's not as many of them, but like the deep learning for biology, I found really interesting. And the reinforcement learning for finance, I found interesting. And then a lot of stuff you learn in those books, you can apply to other industries. But I thought those were pretty fun to read. And someone said they're new as well. Self-learning. What resources are you going through? It's always fun to see what type of resources people are going through. Oh, let me pull up while people are potentially answering that question. I'll pull up the LM from scratch book. Also, I need I'll put this in the GitHub if it's not already in there. Manning gave us a code to use as well for, can't get into my Twitter messages where they sent it. Here's a code. I think it's just AI Book Club or AI-Book-Club for Manning. And I think you can get 50% off a book online. So if you want to read the LM from scratch book online, you can get it. Get the link to that real quick though. That's the book I'm going to share is the one I was recommending, which is Build a Large Language Model from Scratch. I'll share that in the chat here. Oh, and then the other one I mentioned was Building LMs for Production. Again, I don't think it'll be too outdated, even though we read it last year and the space moves fast, but that was a good one. But someone said for self-learning, they have been using Notebook LM. Sometimes I will put 5 or 6 relevant YouTube videos and ask it to make a 20-30 minute audio overview. That's awesome. I have been using Notebook LM to help me read research papers, and that's been really fun too. So anything interesting that week that comes out, I can throw it in there and also have it generate a 15-minute audio summary. And sometimes it doesn't have everything in that paper, but it does a really good job of kind of building up the concepts. And then I might go read the paper afterwards. But I've really liked using Notebook LM as well. And I haven't done it with the video summaries, though. That might be interesting. So instead, is it available on O'Reilly? Because they have an O'Reilly subscription. Yeah, so if you have the O'Reilly subscription, all of these books actually, and the building LM from scratch, I think all the Manning stuff is on O'Reilly. The only one that wasn't on here was this one, because it's just his own publication. But the O'Reilly subscription has packed Manning No Starch Press. I'm not sure how soon they get on there when they're released, but the building a LM from scratch is on there. And he's writing another book that I think should come out this year, which is building a reasoning model from scratch. So like, how does DeepSeek work, et cetera. That's going to be really good. I really like the author's style. Oh, and Raj also said, also reading the hands-on ML PyTorch selected chapters. Yeah, so that's going to be what we're going to read and discuss in January. And the events are posted on the Luma. I also post them several places like Meetup, etc., that you can find them on. But this is going to be the best kind of ground truth to see what events are coming up. And usually it's the last Tuesday of every month. This was an exception because the holidays are around. So I wanted to try to get this event in earlier than later because a lot of people don't show up on the last week of December to meetups. So we have about 10 minutes before I got to wrap up the stream and go to other work. If anyone else has any other things they want to call out or mention, let me know. Next year in 2026 too, I'll probably do more workshop type content, partially through work. Sometimes it'll be covering relevant content like this. So, might be how to build multi-agent planner executor systems using Flight as an orchestration piece, but you can also take out that part. So if you're just looking for educational content around agents, I'm excited to be building probably a lot of that in 2026. So keep an eye out for that, as well as training. So I've done a lot of fine tuning last year as well, and I'm going to do some updated content this year on the fine tuning side as well. I'll also mention, again, if you weren't here at the beginning when we had the little shout out area, but if you're looking for a job and or hiring, you can also share that in the chat. They said they want to thank us for the education resources and guidance. Yeah, thanks for asking good questions. And if anyone has any other resources they want to share, throw them in the chat. and any other books you want to read for 2026. Keep it in mind. You can join the Slack channel. Someone said, do we have recordings for the previous sessions? Yeah, so all of the 2025 sessions are recorded. Let me get a link to that real quick. So the ones before that, we did a different format in 2024, which was doing LinkedIn audio live, and it wasn't, we didn't get recordings of them. So they live one on LinkedIn, like where you're watching probably. I think most people are tuning in on LinkedIn, but also in the in my YouTube channel here, there's just a live section recorded. Oops, did that go through? One thing about StreamYard, it's not StreamYard's fault, but there's like a chat thing in the studio, but it doesn't work going to LinkedIn. I can see the LinkedIn comments, but I can't post to it, so I have to switch to another tab, and sometimes that gets a little weird. Someone said, the book for January on PyTorch, does it teach by building a hands-on project? I believe so. I haven't read it yet. Raj, if you've read some of the chapters, might be able to answer that better. I can pull up the chapter list real quick. I'm pretty sure most of that book is hands-on from when I've skimmed like the older one, but I haven't read this one yet. I think it's all, I think it does a lot of hands-on examples. So it goes through fundamentals of machine learning, the machine learning landscape, and then end-to-end machine learning project. And if I click in there, there's sections like working with real data, looking at the big picture, getting the data. And it looks like this walks you through end-to-end with code, how to probably build your first machine learning project. And then it goes into other chapters like classification, training models, decision trees. And just as I'm skimming through, it looks like there is a fair amount of code examples like scikit-learn for kind of doing all these things. So I don't know how end-to-end it really is when it says end-to-end here. Like, it might not go through the deployment piece, but it looks like it goes through per chapter on like, here's how to do regression, and here's an example for it. But it might not go end-to-end on every chapter for how to get a data set, clean it. It looked like there was a chapter talking about all the steps, but it's a whole bunch of little things, it looks like. And I'm kind of excited because they've also added a lot. I think it's new for this one. They go into deep learning. I think obviously the other one did with TensorFlow. Now it does it with PyTorch. And then they go to computer vision with like CNNs. And then they talk about sequence processing with RNNs and CNNs. And then they go into RNNs and attention. And then there's a transformers for natural language processing and chatbots. Again, I haven't read this, but just skimming through real quick right now. Those look like probably really good chapters. And I think you build a transformer from scratch-ish. Like, I'm sure you use PyTorch, but I think that stuff's really good to know, kind of how to probably build that architecture underneath. And then you have vision and multimodal transformers as a chapter title, speeding up transformers. Again, I haven't read it, so I'm not sure how in depth it goes with that. And then autoencoders, GANs, and diffusion models. And then reinforcement learning. And again, this is all in one book, so I'm assuming when it has like this RL chapter and skimming through it, like it covers the basics of reinforcement learning, but it's probably not going to be, as good as maybe some of the standalone books dedicated topic. But I think this will give you a really, really good breadth on kind of all these ML topics. And and then it even goes into, no, that's the last chapter, reinforcement learning. So it covers kind of the whole gamut of ML. I'm excited to go through it. Raj says, it's not theory rich, but enough theory to understand the concepts. It's mostly practically on how to apply the concepts. Cool. Which I kind of like that in a lot of books. Again, I like reading different types as well, but that sounds good. So you can kind of go through a chapter probably pretty quick, it looks like, for like how to do a regression model in scikit-learn. But again, for the N10, I might not go through like deployment for each one too. It's probably like fitting the model and then doing predictions with it, potentially in a notebook would be my guess. And someone asked if there's any other books that minimally can be added for the required theory to go along. I think skimming it does a little bit of theory. It's just not the whole theory. There's actually what's it called? I'll be right back. There's a book that's like the de facto statistics one that actually has like a lot of the theory. I'm gonna go grab it. This is the classic book that you've probably seen around, the Intro to Statistical Learning, which might be too much theory depending on what you're looking for. But this goes way more into the mathematical concepts, and it does have applications in Python if you get the newer edition. The older one was in applications in R. This one was like 2021 or something like that, and they also added a section with deep learning and neural networks now, which is kind of nice because the first edition did not have that. And then now it uses Python instead of R, which most people are probably using for deep learning and machine learning. But yeah, I think like what Raj said, it's probably good, at least for how I like to learn, go through that one first and then add supplemental theory, which could be from a book or just Googling or using ChatGPT type of tools for learning more about those specific topics like classification, decision trees, etc. A lot of those have been around for a long time too. So I think a lot of the results probably in something like a ChatGPT would be pretty good. But this is the classic one that you'll probably see around a lot too. I haven't read all of this. I've read some of the first edition a long time ago. Yeah, Raj says ISLR and ISLP are their favorite, although they never learned R. Same, I never ran any of the R code. I had read some of the first one, the Introduction to Statistical Learning in R. And then I just got this one a couple weeks ago, so I haven't gone through all this one, but I do want to maybe brush up on some stuff with it. Well, we're at the basically at the hour mark here, so I'm going to wrap up in a couple minutes. Any last things people want to shout out? Someone said Finding Patterns is a good and deep theoretical book. I haven't seen that one. I'm going to look that up. Finding Patterns. I think someone said thumbs up for the January book. I think it's going to be a good one. And Aristotle said, great overview for those who are enthusiastic about AI. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Also, let me know about any open opportunities for a prompt engineer business analyst. Awesome. Thank you so much for everyone coming, for talking a lot in the chat. It makes it way more fun for me. Obviously, recapping the book. The recapping doesn't do the book always justice, so I definitely recommend reading it if you thought any of the chapters were interesting. And I'm excited to kind of brush up on a lot of the other classical ML stuff, maybe code a transformer from scratch. And yeah, the chapters sound really good in this. I'm excited to go through it. So I'm excited to talk to everyone again in January. Again, this one is on January 27th on Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time. I will hopefully talk to some of you then. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn too. If there's any other questions I didn't get to, feel free to DM me or join the Slack channel I had shared out and introduce yourself there as well. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to wrap up the stream. Hopefully talk to some of you all later.